If it's happening in New York, New Jersey, or Long Island, hear about it with Joe Piscopo. Mornings, 6 to 10 on AM 970. The Answer.
Portions of this show sponsored by Route 22 Nissan.
Jersey Joe on the radio. What a morning. Mamma mia. It's 9:28. Greg Smith is the lead investigative reporter for the New York Daily News. We are very privileged to have him in the studio. He's doing an incredible job keeping his eye on the ball on kids, helping kids in New York City. First of all, Greg, welcome, and thanks for coming in on this hot morning and on the cusp of 4th of July.
Happy to be here. Happy to help out.
Yeah, well, listen, we've been having a silly morning, but man, oh man, and I see all the protests about children all around the world. You're taking care of the kids in New York. God bless you for that. How did you break this story, and where are we in this lead paint poisoning story, man?
Sure. What has happened is that I've been covering this lead paint issue in public housing in New York City for about 2 years now. So back in 2015, I started doing it. And the issue I had was they kept telling me everything was fine and that there's nothing to see here, move along. And I wasn't convinced of that, and so I kept pushing at it. What recently happened was the United States Attorney for Manhattan filed a complaint against the Housing Authority in which he laid out in lurid detail all of the lies that they have been telling me and the public and the tenants and the taxpayers about what they've been doing on lead paint and other issues within public housing. And then when I was trying to get this most recent story about how there's now more than 800 kids, the city's been saying 19 kids. That's what they're saying. There's 19 kids with lead poisoning in the city's public housing, which is 400,000 tenants. And I was able to get this data about the fact that it's really not that. It's more than 800 kids. And the way I did it was I called up the de Blasio administration, and I pointed out that the mayor was spending some quality time in Texas railing about the lack of transparency by the federal government in hiding kids who were separated from their parents. And so I pointed out to them, I am preparing to write a story to say that while you're down in Texas worrying about those kids, why are you sitting on hundreds of kids who have lead poisoning in the city public housing?
God bless you for doing that, man. I swear to God. Because otherwise they let it go. So anyway, continue.
They were preparing to let it go. They had no interest in
See, this is what's great about the press right here. This is the great journalism. You should be so proud of yourself. I'm telling you. I've been railing about that, but they'll set out a facade. They'll set out a story, and we're supposed to go with that narrative. So continue. I'm sorry. So where do we go with? I mean, what was your result when you went to City Hall?
So what happened was after I forced their hand, they released this data to me last week, and what it shows is that there's 820 kids over the last few years who have registered elevated blood lead levels. And the problem with that is that when lead gets into, especially these are little kids, by the way, this is kids 5 and under. And the problem is that a child that has elevated lead in their blood is likely to have developmental delays. So this is not just a bunch of numbers. This is children, and there's a lot of them. And the city has done not a lot to deal with this. I'm not sure what they're going to do now. My question to them is, do they know who these 800 kids are? And what are they going to do to go back and look and see what happened with those kids? And were some of them put into special education courses? I mean, what was the actual real impact of this on families?
Wow, and I have to ask you this, and I know Frankie put some questions for me here. First of all, why did the mayor keep the head of NYCHA around? And these are a couple questions. And was the mayor indeed dishonest with the public?
Well, the one I can give you one exact example of this. Back in April 2016, the head of the Housing Authority, that's Shola Olatoye, was informed that the city was not in compliance with the regulations that they were supposed to follow to test for lead. Mm-hmm. And she told the mayor's office of this. The mayor's office was now aware of this, but said nothing. And they didn't say anything until the City Department of Investigation came out with a report revealing all of this in November of 2017. So they sat on it for more than a year.
Wow. So now you got to stay on this. I mean, isn't it terrible that you got to go to City Hall and you kind of got to guilt them into it? And did the mayor lie to the federal authorities as well? I mean,
the chairwoman of the Housing Authority certified in a sworn statement that the Housing Authority was in compliance with all of its required lead paint inspections in October of 2016 when she knew that they were not. So there was a false certification that was filed with the federal government.
Wow, man!
And what comes of that, I don't know. That this is public knowledge now. Everybody knows about it now. At the time, we did not know that.
Yeah, and does the administration go after these people? I mean, who's the watchdog?
So what's happened is, because of this, the U.S. attorney filed this complaint and has entered into this thing called a consent decree, which is basically it's a deal. They made a deal with the city and with the Housing Authority to have a monitor come in. So there's going to be this watchdog type person who's going to be appointed by a federal judge. And then the federal monitor will oversee the Housing Authority going forward, and hopefully we'll turn this thing around, because right now it's in kind of desperate straits. Yesterday they revealed that they actually need to have $31.8 billion worth of work to make the place, habitable.
Yeah. Is it from the water? Is it from kids? Remember, see, I'm old, man. I remember when kids used to eat like paint chips. They eat the paint chips.
That's what that is. That's what the lead paint problem is, because this lead paint is from like back in the 50s.
Yeah.
And it was banned in the mid 70s, but it's still there. And because most of the public housing in New York City is really old, it's an average of 60 years old.
What happened with the heating over the winter, man?
No, but that's the boilers that are like 50 years old that don't function.
And why does it? Forgive me, I'm sorry. I get so fired up. I know
You're not the only one who gets fired up.
No, they don't fix it. But if it's a national issue, it's going to make national television. They're going to be down to the border with the fence in front of them. They'll run down there They're not taking care of the kids at home. And so I'm telling you, I can't give you enough credit for that, for bringing this out. You'll stay on the story to make sure they don't walk on it.
I'm just getting started.
And the kids, do you have the names of the children who were affected?
I have some of them. I don't have them all. They don't release that stuff.
They don't tell you who it is.
You have to find them, and I've found so far 28 of them.
And so you got a parent whose kid's not learning as well as you should. They don't know. The parent doesn't know. They're under probably duress anyway. They can't even get heat in the wintertime, and now they got to worry about their kid.
I would love to see the mayor sit down with these 28 parents and just tell them.
You could make that happen, Greg.
About what they were thinking, what they did when they did it, because when you talk to these parents, it's very upsetting, because these are little kids, by the way. They're not, they're not 20 years old. They're like under 5 years old.
You've talked to these.
Yes, absolutely. And it, like I said, the problem is this has a real impact on a kid's life. If a kid gets put into a special ed program, they're, I think, a couple steps behind. You have, and also you have to follow through. You have to make sure that this kid is, properly educated to get back on track. Yeah. And I've talked to most of the parents that I've talked to with these kids who have this problem the kids have ended up in special ed. And that's a real thing that happens to a family. I got to tell you, Greg Smith with Piscopo in the morning, and we got to go take a break. But 9:36, Greg's a lead investigative reporter for the New York Daily News. We rail on the Daily News sometimes. I rail on the press sometimes. But I've always said, if I ever went into public office, you have to keep, and I said this many times, somebody from the press pool to keep watch. This is the best. You are a stellar example of everything that's right about journalism. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
God bless you, and Godspeed with everything. You're welcome here anytime, man. And please come back and keep us posted on this story.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Greg Smith from the Daily News. Stellar.
Everybody knows this guy. No, everybody knows he can do a radio show. Joe Piscopo. Mornings, 6 to 10 on AM 970. The Answer.